Welcome to the Deep Leadership Podcast. Today I'm joined by a returning guest to the show, Chuck Whitworth. You might remember Chuck, also known by many on Twitter as Chief Chuck, from way back in episode 11. Chuck is a retired Navy Chief Petty Officer with 24 years of service. He served as an aviation structural mechanic, maintenance manager, and instructor flight engineer on the P-3 Orion. Chuck amassed over 5,000 flight hours in his career and led over 1,000 sailors in various maritime patrol squadrons and staff positions. He currently is employed as a senior program manager for international programs at Naval Air Systems Command. And I'm excited to have Chuck back on the show to talk about an interesting subject. We're going to talk about leadership failure, which should be interesting. So, Chuck, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, John. It's truly an honor and a pleasure to be back. And 3.5 years, oh my gosh, it's gone by in a flash, and it's been great to be one of the first, and then watch your continued success with the podcast and the book. So, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you back. I didn't realize it was so long since your last visit. I just assumed it was like last year. And then I looked, it was 3.5 years ago. You were one of the, I think we're at episode 11, just one of the early ones. We were just new at podcasting, didn't know what I was doing. And now we're, a top 2% show in the world. And and you're back. And nothing has happened over 3.5 years, right? It's been just a quiet, the world that we've lived in.
Yeah, not a thing has happened. Nothing newsworthy that I could think of in the last 3 years for sure.
It's been a crazy 3.5 years. So
yeah, I think we've all learned something.
We have, and we're still here. So which is good, which is really good. So just in the interest of, we have a lot of new listeners from episode 11, but tell us a little bit. I mentioned a little bit in the intro, but tell us what you did in your naval career. And then kind of what you do today. So just get us up to speed with what you did and kind of what you do today.
Yeah, sure. No. So I'm one of those guys. I joined the military right out of high school way back in the day of 1981. Didn't want to grow up in a mill town in Georgia. So the military or jail seemed to be the only option. So I chose wisely and chose the military, did a stint in the Army for a couple of years. Figured out I really didn't like camping out for a living. So went and talked to the Navy recruiters, and they were happy to have me. So joined the Navy, got into aviation, started with an ASW with the anti-submarine warfare platforms, did a couple of tours in helicopters, then got to go to a P-3 squadron and decided I really liked the P-3 Orion, and I really liked per diem in some of the locations we went to. Worked on the P-3, got qualified, and then decided I watched the flight engineers, which is an enlisted position in the Navy, naval air crewman. Sit up front with the pilots, flight engineers responsible for all the engines, the aircraft systems, emergency procedures, fueling, flight data management. If we get home with gas, we did a good job, and if we get home without gas, we're all getting wet. So, like you said, I had about 5,000 hours as an instructor flight engineer. So did basically 24 years in the Navy. Retired back in 2007. Did like a lot of veterans do and go immediately to work for the Navy. When we get out, was a contractor for a few years, a contractor support, working P-3, oddly enough, and then got a government position as a logistician, was on the P-8 and the P-3, went to international programs, delivered P-3s to Taiwan, Germany's midlife upgrades, P-8s to Norway. I have done a stint in weapons with some pretty cool, with Harpoon, Joint Standoff Weapon, the LRASM, long range weapons. And then currently I'm working for Air Anti-Submarine Warfare Systems Program Office, basically selling sonobuoys, the submariner's nightmare. Selling especially die-cast sonobuoys, selling those to our international partners that are operating the P-8 and the H-60 Romeo now. And that's how we got to here.
That's fantastic. Yeah, you're right. The sonobuoys are the submariner's nightmare, and having heard many of them through the hull of a submarine, it's annoying, obnoxious, and what's worse is that there's nothing you can do about it. You can't get away.
Nope.
That's the worst thing.
We're listening.
So yeah, I did a lot of operations with the P3s, and when they had you, it was kind of game over. It was one of those things that we can get away from a lot of surface ships, a lot of different weapons platforms, but the P3 and Sonabui, you're done. You're
Yep.
toast.
Yep, we can stay out there a long time and we don't
Yeah.
go away. So yeah,
Yeah.
it was good. You get to see the like you said, we joined the Navy and you do get to see the world a lot and you meet a
Yeah.
lot of really really cool people. And I tell everybody today that's the best job I've ever had was being in the Navy, and for a lot of reasons that if you know you know. So yeah, I couldn't be prouder of my service, and I'm glad to extend that leadership that I learned there to a generation that's still coming up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was thinking way back when we had you on the show before. One of the things we talked about, I think we the name of the episode was "Listen to the Chief" or "Listen to
Hmm.
Your Chief," and we talked about the important role that a chief petty officer plays in the Navy. It's a very unique role, and so maybe just share a little bit about that. As far as the role that a chief petty officer plays in the Navy, and the role that you played in the Navy is really critical, and it's something that is unique. You don't see that so much in the business side as well, but it was such an important position in the Navy.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to that point, to a transition, I had the same issue, and a lot of chiefs that I know have the problem. If you come out of the Navy and you enter the civilian quote unquote sector, even if it's still government, um, the first thing that slaps you in the face is nobody cares if you were a chief. In the
Right.
civilian, they could care less. But I also found out that works the same way with captains. A lot of folks, if the people don't have an understanding of our hierarchy and structure and our culture, they just don't know and they don't care. But in the Navy, the chief, you grow up as a young enlisted guy and you learn, you're scared to death of the chief, first of all, but then you learn that the chief is as mean and as gruff as they are. They have your back and they're there to teach you. And they're, more importantly, from a leadership standpoint, they are there to have your best interest at heart, represent you up the chain as well. And sometimes they have to be that screen between a lot of really, stupid things that come down from the front office sometimes, that they have to be that screen. So you learn that, in the Chiefs creed that you do once you pin your anchors on is, they tell you that, you're to be the ambassador for the Navy. You're the lamp of knowledge of the Navy, that the young sailors and the junior officers are looking to the chief for knowledge and experience and wisdom and guidance. So, kind of the role that the chief and the mystique that behind it, yeah, we can be like that when we have to. But I think most true chiefs that you talk to, we really treasure our role of being advocates for the junior sailors and teaching them not only technical skills, but leadership skills, but also, for me personally, some of my greatest um, benefit I got out of being a chief, and what I enjoyed the most is when you would get the new officers that would come into the squadron, the junior officers, you had an opportunity to make or break the future of the Navy, in my opinion. And it's not that they didn't come with knowledge, but they didn't have the experience. And how some chiefs treated junior officers was just awful. But the chiefs that truly cared, yeah, we were tough and we were hard, but we would always find that junior officer and kind of pull them alongside and go, "Shipmate, listen, you know, hey, sir, listen, you kind of, when you get up in front of the troops, maybe go from this direction and talk like this. Hey, sir, I get where you're coming from. Maybe not a good idea because," and you help them you help them gain their first successes as leaders in the Navy. And you do it without any credit, and you do it in the background, and you do it so that it's not about you. So chiefs really have that servant leadership and that selfless leadership thing down pat, because it's not about us. When things go bad, it's my fault. I'm the chief. When things go good, you guys are awesome. I didn't have a damn thing to do with it. Um, so it plays a good role, and in a minute, I think in the Navy they consider the chief's middle management or whatever you would consider it in the civilian sector. But it was also that great gap of the bridge that you talk so well about, of, it's a people business.
Mm.
How do you bridge that gap between, the enlisted guys, which are the blue collar workers, and the officers which are the white collar, administrative program management stuff. So you have to be that person that you understand strategy and you understand tactics, and you have to lead from the front. And so, yeah, it's a unique position in the military for the chiefs, especially the way that we were treated in the Navy as a chief. But it also carries out, I think, when you go out in the civilian sector, once you learn you're not in the military anymore, there are still a lot of good, valuable lessons, like I just pointed out, that carries you very well into the civilian sector of focusing on leading people, being there for your people, learning to share successes, but learning to shoulder blame as well. So it was a valuable tool for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just give a quick shout out to Chief Nunez, my first chief petty officer as a young ensign showing up on the Tennessee. And Chief Nunez had about as many years in the Navy as I'd had on the planet Earth. Yet
Yeah,
he was kind to me, showed me the ropes, and helped me be successful. And I think that is a really important partnership between young junior officers and their chief is a really strong partnership. And
absolutely.
I appreciate everything Chief Nunez did for me. One of the things you said in the prior interview, which it stood with me, and I didn't even listen to the old episode, but you said something back then. It's always stuck with me. Is that in a lot of ways, sometimes the officers can be the brains of the organization, and the enlisted guys are the body or the legs, the feet of the organization. You said that the chief petty officer connects the two, and you're the backbone of the Navy. And I think that really stuck with me,
Yep.
is that connecting force between the officers and the enlisted team. And it's really important. It's an important role to play. And it's, again, something you don't see as much in business as you do in the military. So I always appreciated the chief position. I've always had so much respect for the chief petty officer position because it was such an important role. It's such a unique role that you don't really see it any other place. So yeah, thanks
Right.
for that. I really appreciate you
Yeah,
sharing that, because I think that helps put in perspective a little bit about what that unique role that you played in that role. So
absolutely.
and my son, by the way, my son is in the Navy. He's enlisted, so he is on the USS Thomas Hudner. He's in the Persian Gulf right now, and that's what I told him when he got to his ship. I said, "Listen to your chief."
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's funny. My son, he joined the Navy as well, and did a tour. And um, I, I, I had to hear a lot of stuff from him. And I think it might have been a disadvantage for him to go in. He had heard all the sea stories, that me and a bunch of fellow chiefs that we all hung together. He had heard a lot of the sea stories, and I had to keep reminding him that the Navy of 2013 was not the Navy of 1985. So uh, he was expecting a lot of things, and in a way he did. He experienced some very, very good chiefs and some very bad chiefs, unfortunately, on his ship. And I told him to take away the same thing that chiefs had told me, that, hey, look, man, there's a great benefit to having a bad leader as well, because you learn something from every leader you encounter, whether it's a good or a bad leader. If nothing else, you learn what not to do. So that's a gift in itself. So yeah, he found out the hard way. He thought he had an advantage being a Chiefs kid, but he found out that when he would slack off, that of course I had the email and phone numbers of all the chiefs on his ship, and they would give me a call, and I would promptly. I got to join a lot of impromptu chief mess meetings with my son, and so that's always, I'm sure, embarrassing for him, that when your dad shows up to a Chiefs meeting via phone call, that he's chewing your ass in the Chiefs mess. But I told him, I'm a chief first right now. You're in the Navy. I'm a chief first. You're my son second. But
I love it.
yeah,
I love it. Well, so far I've stayed away from everything to do with what my son's doing. So, because
yeah,
I've been out for 30 years, so I don't even
yeah.
know what's going on in the Navy these days.
Yeah,
So,
it's totally different now. So I'm
yeah,
sure that my style of leadership in the Navy wise would, I'm not sure it would be quite
I
in line
I
with what McPine wants to do right now.
I think you're entirely correct. So, so in the introduction, I mentioned that we're going to talk about leadership failure,
Hmm.
and that's really what I get into. You recently had a leadership failure in a high stress job. You were a GS 15, you had a big, high visible job. You had a failure, but it eventually led to success. So I wanted to get a chance for you to share that story because I think there's a lot of lessons in that we can all learn as leaders through your story. So share the situation, what happened, and then what you did about it, and how it kind of led to where you're at today.
Yeah, sure. So, and it's like when I talked to you in pre-show, it plays out like a three-part Greek tragedy. It's I think it came out to a happy ending. It remains to be seen. But back in March of 2020, um, there was our current director of international programs at our weapons system, where I was currently working as as an integrated program team lead. Um, he retired. They opened up his job. I was a GS-14. For those that don't understand the GS system, you can Google it. It's OPM. It's a very open. You can find it. You can even see what I make, and it's no big deal. But for in civil government civilian service, GS 13, 14, 15 are considered high grade. GS 15 is the equivalent of a Navy captain. SES, senior executive service ranks, or flag officer equivalents in the civilian world. So I applied for the job. Really, the only reason I applied for the job was to put my name in the hat, show them that I cared about our organization, that I was invested in it, and I was invested enough to try to put my name in the hat. I'd only been a GS-14 for a couple of years, so this was very highly unlikely that I'd get selected. So just when you think it's highly unlikely you'll get selected for something, what happens? You get selected for something. Um, so I took it on. Started off with a pretty hard case of imposter syndrome, which I think a lot of humble leaders we do that. We go, we don't deserve to be here. But then I finally realized, well, now I have the responsibility. I have to watch. To quote a book title of somebody I know. It was my watch then, and so I had to just suck it up. It didn't matter what I thought. I had to lead. So the program I'm with was we serve 36 countries for standoff weapons and cruise missiles. 36 countries. It was at the time about a $13 billion portfolio, moving a lot of weapons. Worked to Ukraine situation. Everybody that saw the tugboat that got sank by the harpoon, that was my team that we put together. Did it in about 45 days. We drew something out on the napkin of how we could build a launcher out of spare parts and get a spare harpoon set of missiles. And then 45 days later, they're sinking a Russian tug. So obviously, a lot of OSD. I'm sorry, I'm using the acronyms. I should know better. Secretary of Defense level, President level, Congress level attention. So it's high stress. Um, did this continuously for a couple of years, and I realized about 2 years into it that I went to the doctor, and I had a Navy doctor and flight surgeon, and he basically told me, he looked at the numbers, he looked at me, and he goes, I don't know what's happened to you in the last couple of years, but you are a train wreck. He goes, Chief, he goes, you're committing slow motion suicide. And that kind of woke me up. I was constantly, wasn't sleeping, but about 2, 3 hours a night. Had I'm already a chubby guy, have been, but I gained a lot of weight. People that knew me knew I didn't look good. I was just in a crappy mood all the time. But I kept trying to exercise, and I kept going, man, I keep cramping up. Had these things. They'd go away. Turns out, went to the cardiologist. They called silent heart attacks.
Oh, geez.
Um, that I had about probably for about 6, 7 months. I'd have little mini heart attacks. Couldn't really feel all of the symptoms because I'd become a type 2 diabetic, and so nerve damage. I couldn't feel all of the symptoms. So really, I was, just like he said, I was committing slow motion suicide. Knew I had to do something, and I knew what the outcome was going to be, and it was crushing me because I realized that as good of a leader as I am, and I don't say that out of my own braggart, but I mean, people tell me, and I understand I am a good leader. I had taken really good care of my people, to the point as a leader. I had taken so good care of my people that I was doing their work for them. I wasn't delegating anymore. I was taking on tasks. I was going and getting the butt chewings, which is fine for a leader, but I also wasn't holding my team accountable.
Mm.
I had given them the responsibility, but I was not holding them accountable for the results. I was taking it all on myself. I was telling them to take their time off. I was making sure they got out of the office early. Leaders, if you're a leader, listen to me when I tell you. When I tell you this, when you think that you have to be the last one out of the office, everybody else there is waiting for you to leave.
Mm.
They're going to hang around too. Nobody wants to leave before the boss. You think you're being noble and wise that I'm the last one out. Captain goes down with the ship. They're going to sit there with you. You're eating up their time. You're not managing your time well enough if you can't prioritize to get out of work on time. Everything that I was doing was not leading by example, which is rule number one of leadership. The first thing you learn about being a leader is you lead by example. You walk the walk, you talk the talk, you set the tone for the team. I also realized I was coming into work, I had a scowl on my face. I wasn't my jovial self. I wasn't Chuck. I wasn't, and people, John, I'm telling you, people that I've known for 10 years that have worked with me, they were coming up to me and going, "Hey, dude, we miss old Chuck. We loved old Chuck.
Mm.
Where's
Yeah.
old Chuck?"
Yeah.
Old Chuck was the guy that was putting googly eyes on the little figures of the men's room. The guy that was just people liked being, and I was going, I love him too. I miss him, but
Yeah.
I can't be him anymore because now I've got this senior rank and I have to act a certain way.
Yeah. Yeah.
I couldn't be myself. I wasn't leading by example. I was a walking time bomb, closer to death than I've probably ever been in all of the flights that I've ever done, all of the stuff I've done in the Navy. I was closer to killing myself, not knowing it at the time or not realizing it. And so I had to make a decision. So the decision was hard. I called up a friend of mine at the program office I'm at now. She and I had worked together, and she's the principal deputy program manager. I'm like, Jesse, hey, listen, you're looking for people, you're looking for someone to do your international program because you got a vacant billet, it's a GS-14 position. I got somebody for you. She goes, great, who? I was like, how about me? She goes, wait, what? She goes, you're
Mm.
gonna step down? I was like, I have to, Jesse. And I told her the story, and she's like, please come on. So my leadership was very supportive of me. They understood. So like I said, I didn't take a pay cut. The way our rank system works, it's really irrelevant. And that's a key point that I'll get to at the end that I learned. But I just sat down with my wife and I'm like, I got to do something, and this isn't it. And she goes, yeah. She goes, I don't even like being around you right now because you come
Mm.
home late, you're grumpy, you get up
Yeah.
early, you're pissed off constantly, you're on
Yeah.
the phone on the weekends, you're at the beck and the call, and you don't know how to turn your cell phone off. And that was a problem. So I made the decision. I told my team that I felt like my time of leading them had come to an end, and I told them why. And I took on this job, and that was in March of this year, 2023. And so that's kind of the Greek tragedy because I sat around and go, oh my God, what did I do? People
Yeah.
are going to see me as a failure. I'm a quitter. I couldn't handle it. I'm weak. I wasn't that. You're going to hear the talking of he never should have been in there in the first place. I was trying to justify my imposter syndrome from day one of going, see, you really didn't deserve it. And then listening to a lot of things. And so I listened. My wife made me go on vacation. I'm sitting in Daytona Beach and I'm listening to Deep Leadership podcast. And it was one of the gentlemen that was in Texas. I forget what his role is, but he started. I listened to him and I'm like, you know what? He's right. And I listen to a lot of your podcast. And I'll tell people, I don't listen to a lot of podcasts. I really don't. Yours, I listen to going to work. Because you do have good guests on them. And so I'm starting to think, and I'm thinking, and oddly enough, I'm sitting here, I'm going, what would John tell me? What does he think about me as a leader?
What would John say?
What would John say? What would Jocko say? What would all of these other people say? And I had this epiphany sitting on the beach that, you know what, they would say exactly what you don't want to admit to yourself, that you did everything right with everybody else except yourself. You
Yes.
did not
Yes.
lead yourself first.
Yeah.
And this is the point that I learned. And you said it, I've read it 1,000 times. Simon Sinek will say, all of the great people that are around us will tell you, I cannot lead everyone else until I learn to lead myself first.
Yeah. Yeah.
All the cliches, I was living out all the cliches. Can't pour from an empty cup. You certainly can't. Got to take care of yourself. You got to lead by example, set the tone. Walking into work in a grumpy mood, and then I'm getting pissed off at everybody. What are you all? I'm like, why are you guys all pissed off? And then I'm realizing they're sitting there and they're reflecting me. I'm the leader. If I'm
Mm.
mad, they're going to be mad. They don't even know what they're mad about. I didn't know
Yeah.
what I was mad about. So now we're all sitting there pissed off at each other, and nobody really knows why we're all mad. And
Yeah.
the job's not getting done. The mission's not getting accomplished.
Yeah.
And so I went through the self-pity stage of the almost like the 5 stages of grief. Oh, poor me. I've ruined this. I'm a nobody. Nobody's going to want me. I'm the worthless leader now. I'm a quitter. And then, so then I listened to, again, another deep leadership podcast, and I connected with some of the people, your guest on LinkedIn, talked to them, went back and read all my books, started doing some really serious thinking. And then and in more than just this way, my life kind of changed a little bit due to your podcast. Is you had Brian Jodis on
Yeah.
from F3, and it's a little it's a little emotional, but it hit me, man.
Yeah.
And I reached out to Brian on Twitter, and I'm like, brother, I don't know what to say. And so Brian interacted with me, and he goes, dude, you're okay, man. You're
Yeah.
all right. You're
Yeah.
gonna be okay. So I started going to some F3 stuff, and then Jerry Adams, Jerry,
Yeah.
Jerry's book came out, and I got to go to his book signing in Pennsylvania, got
I
to meet
saw that
Jerry
you
in
went there.
person.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man, listen, and a lot of the FOE guys were there supporting him, and I got to talk to them. And I realized that, dude, it is not about you. You have turned this inward, and
Yeah.
while it is about you, it's not about you.
Mm.
And I say that to quit. I say that I had to make myself quit listening to myself.
Mm.
And just recently, is just a couple of weeks ago, I have finally reached the point, um, between getting my fitness back, getting my health back, getting my faith right. And when I say faith, just like the F3 guys will tell you, it's not a denomination. It's just a belief of something. You're a part of something that is bigger than you, and you have an obligation to pay back. And what is your true worth as a person? So that's kind of turned my life around a little bit. And then I actually did have to go see probably the most powerful thing outside of Brian, and then Frank Schwartz. You had Frank on as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dark Helmet was on. And so I
Mm.
reached out. These guys are awesome because you can reach out to them
Yeah.
in real life, and they will just embrace you.
Yeah.
Same
Yeah.
thing with Jerry. Jerry has talked to me, Jeff Putnam, all of the guys, anybody
Yeah.
I reach out to, they're like, brother, you're okay, man. We
Yeah.
got you. We
Yeah.
got your 6. To shout out Brian's podcast. Pick up
That's right.
but I did have to go. I didn't have to. It was suggested by my doctor strongly that I go, and I never knew there was such a thing as a occupational stress therapist. But
Interesting.
but
Yeah.
but there is. There's not many of them. So I talked to this guy. He listened to my story, listened to my life story, let me pour it all out. And he goes, Chuck, he goes, you seem like a pretty smart guy, and you seem okay. He goes, so listen, he goes, let me ask you this. He goes, we can agree, can we not, that one day everyone on this earth, we will all have a tombstone written about us. And I'm like, well, yeah, so far I don't know anyone that's gotten out of here alive, but
Right.
okay. He goes, listen, man, it's very simple. He goes, you need to cage your mindset like this. He goes, if you had the opportunity to write your own tombstone, would you write on your tombstone, here lies Naval Air Systems Command's best program manager ever? Or would you choose the tombstone that says, hey, here lies Chuck. He was a great husband, father, brother, friend, good man, full of honor, lived the best life possible. He goes, which one do you want? He goes, 100 years from now, Chuck, he goes, Work will not know your name. He
Yeah.
goes, you can leave a legacy.
Mm.
He goes, you can leave a legacy, but 100 years from now, they won't know your name. He goes, your family will. He goes, how do you want your family to talk about you 100 years from now? Do you want them talking that, oh yeah, he's the asshole that never came home from work, and when he did, he was in a grumpy mood and never talked to us? Or do you want them talking about you as he was full of life? He loved people. He gave back to his community. He was the best man that he could possibly be. What could I say to that?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's, John, it's stuff that I've known my whole life. We all know it.
Yeah.
I just had to get out of my own head. So to wrap that, now the happy part of the Greek tragedy, I'm down 30 pounds. My blood pressure is under control. I'm no longer a type 2 diabetic. I have found my faith again. I'm using scripture not as a to to preach and pulpit. I'm going through the scripture. I'm using Proverbs as a leadership book. How you can take Proverbs and how these are leadership things. You know, I gave it. In fact, I gave a talk this afternoon about Job, and it wasn't from poor. You never should pray for the patience of Job. Do you really want to be like Job? You probably don't. But
No.
what I did, how I related Job to leadership was, hey, when you're a worker bee and you're down there, do you see what God did with Job? Job kept questioning the boss. And so God very simply said, we'll do a leadership lesson. Job, if you think you can do it better than me, have the seat.
Mm. Yeah.
But did you think about this? Did you think about this? Sometimes it's not so fun to be the boss. It looks fun.
Yeah.
It looks
Yeah.
fun and it's like I've said it, you've seen it on Twitter. I've said it many different ways. Everybody wants to be the boss until it's time to do the boss stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I use that now. And I told my friend today, we left, I'm like, you know what? I wake up in the morning. I used to wake up and go, geez, oh, Pete, I got to go to work. I wake up now and go, hey, first thing I do is I open my eye and I poke and I go, okay, I'm still here. Whew, thanks. Thanks, dude. I'm still here. And then I go, what do I get to do today? What
Yeah.
do I get to do to make the world a better place? How do I become a better leader? How am I a better husband, father? How am I a better what do I get to do today so that when I wind up back here 12, 13, 14 hours from now and get to lay down again, I go, yeah, man, it was a good day. I did all right.
Mm.
So yeah, that's kind of that. It was a leadership failure that I thought, and it was, I did fail. I did not lead the way I should have. But now I'm trying to take that and advocate that and get that message out to other leaders, like with this, going, hey, you don't want to be me.
Yeah.
You don't want to be in a hospital. You don't want to be almost dead. You want to seriously listen, because we all do this. We go, oh, life is short. Somebody gets hurt and we go, oh my God, so and so died. Oh, life is short. We should really live better. And what do? You get up the next day and you do the same thing you've ever done and you forget
Yeah.
all about it.
Yeah.
Don't forget about it. It's too important.
This powerful. There's so many lessons there, and I think that, you know, and listeners, as you hear those lessons and you put yourself in that story, where you fit in that story, right? And I think that a lot of leaders find themselves where, I think there's a lot of things that I noticed, as you said, you were you were acting as if you were acting in the role that you thought somebody at that level should act, right?
Yes.
And so you were playing a part. And I think that we see a lot of that. I saw a lot of that in corporate America, where somebody get promoted to manager, they start acting differently. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I saw it in the Navy too, where people would get their khaki uniform as a chief and they would act different. Like on day one, you're like, wait,
Yep.
you were kind of a cool guy, you know, before. Now you're acting like a chief, you know what I mean? So I think that that's a big problem when you start acting not not authentic to what your real self is, that you're putting on a show for work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when your natural self is here and you're pretending to be or acting a certain way, I think when those are apart, that creates a lot of stress, because you're playing a part that doesn't, you know, that's you're not, it's not natural to you. And I think that creates a lot of stress. And again, I think you're right. A lot of us continue to do things that are unhealthy for us because of fear of what it would look like if I move to a different position. What do
Mm-hmm.
these guys people will think? It doesn't, you know, all the fears I had going into this job are all going to be realized when I move to this other position, you know.
Yep.
You know, it's like me right now. I was a big shot in corporate, you know, vice president for years, right? Ran lots of big businesses. And now I'm a small business leader, right? I have a small team. I have a small factory, right?
Yeah.
So you would say my whole life is a failure compared to what it was, right? But I've never had more fun in my life the last, it'll be 8 years in January,
Exactly.
and I love it, and I can be myself in this role. And I was like you, I kind of moved up pretty high, and I got to the position where I didn't like my job. I spent more time in meetings than I did with people on the shop floor. And I really love being around people on the shop floor. Now I spend all my time with people on the shop floor. I
Yeah.
don't spend any time in meetings at all. And I do what I'm naturally gifted to do. And I think when we do that, I think we're much better off as leaders when we do what's more natural for us. So man, that's
Yeah.
a great story. My hat's off to you for realizing it and then making a shift and change, because a lot of guys don't, and they go right into that heart attack. They go right into
Yep.
65 in the grave, and you're like, what happened? They work themselves to death, and so many guys do that. And the fact that you recognize that you made a shift, made a change, and you brought the old Chuck back,
Yeah.
which I love to
Yeah.
hear.
Yeah. I mean, I had a meeting with my supervisor just this week, and he keeps trying to help me. He goes, I know you want to get your 15 back, Scott. And I told him, I was like, Scott, listen, I this past weekend I thought about it. I turned 60 years old in October. I understand where I'm at in the scope of my career. I can work till whenever I want, but I understand that I probably got at least another 6 years until I can retire again from government service. I told him I would rather. I'm done. I told him I'm done chasing titles, dude. I'm
Yeah,
done chasing paychecks. I know I have started listening to everybody around me. I am okay enough with myself now to say, Chuck, you are a good leader.
yeah,
And the value that you bring to the table is I met a group of interns for NavAir, and we all speak about our programs. I spent the first 20 minutes of my 40 minutes with them telling them my story and going, if you're going to be a government employee, start now. Don't be like me.
yeah,
And then I also tell them from a leadership standpoint, I'm like, if you're a junior person, do not sit in the back of the room and keep your mouth shut and go, well, I'm just junior. They're never going to listen to me. I was like, do you guys have any idea how many good ideas we've lost in the history of this world because
yeah,
somebody sat in the room and went, well, I'm just a little low person. They're not going to listen to me. Have your voice, speak your voice, be brave. And I tell them my story. And I told my boss, I'm like, dude, I'm done chasing titles. Let me spend the next 6 years doing what I do in this program to help ASW, advanced ASW, but in the same time, let me work with the interns. Let me work with the junior people. Let me teach them how to be leaders, not managers. Because, John, I can promise you the US government, federal service, we are no different than business. And I know you brought this up because you teach at UNC, and there's a great insight to industry class at UNC that I got to attend. They actually recognize it now. Business schools, nothing against business schools. Business schools teach people how to manage. We
yeah,
need more people. You said this. We talked about this. We need people that teach people how to lead.
yeah,
How do you teach people how to lead? You have to have the experience of a leader. I can write a book, but you can't read. But if you get a chance to talk to me, talk to you, talk to any of these other great leaders that we know, if you get a chance to sit and talk to us and absorb that from us, get that culture, get that energy, then I'm more interested in creating leaders to build the bench. I want to retire. I want to go off and do something else. But I cannot do it in my good heart conscience. I cannot leave my programs to bad leaders and bad bosses. I still have the watch. I still have that responsibility to build leaders, not just good managers. Trying to teach them the difference between you manage things, you lead people,
mm,
pure and simple.
yeah, absolutely. And the other thing too, I think, Chuck, is a great lesson in leading yourself first. I mean, it's a great lesson in recognizing that, and I have a good friend of mine, John Brubaker, and he's been on the show, Coach Brew, as he's
Yeah.
often called. But he says that if you're, being a leader, you're on stage, right? He says you're on stage 24/7,
Yep.
and he said you got to make sure the backstage is organized, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
you got a complete disaster backstage, your finances are a mess, your health is a mess, you have no spiritual walk, you're not doing anything to grow your mind, like you're not reading, you're not listening to podcasts, you're not, so if you're just working your tail off and then coming home eating junk and watching Netflix and going to bed, and you're not taking care of it. You got this disaster backstage. You can't be the best leader you can be on the front of that
Yep.
stage. Your backstage is a
Absolutely.
mess. And I think
Absolutely.
your story is one of, the backstage was a mess, and you were
Mhm.
neglecting some things. And then you're like, look, I gotta get off the stage, get to this stage where I can take care of the backstage and get that organized. And then now you can go further now that you've got that organized. You've got the support systems in place. You've got your finance, your spirituality, your mental models set, your physical self. And I think that's a really powerful story. I really think that leaders, you're hearing that, and if you feel like you're identifying with the high stress Chuck, find
Yeah.
your way to the old Chuck where you're
Yeah.
back to hopefully putting googly eyes on those on on
Yeah.
the restroom guys. So,
Yeah. No, and I think you're right. And it's just, it's one of those things to where you hear it over and over, but until it slaps you in the face, and it sometimes and again, with the whole faith-based thing, I quit asking I just quit asking God, creator, or whoever. I quit asking, why are you testing me? And I started asking, what are you trying to teach me?
yeah, yeah,
And then that right there will flip your mindset just like that, to
yeah,
where it's like, now even negative things are a gift, because I'm going, what can I learn out of this?
yeah,
I tell people now, I'm very open. I'm like, feedback is a gift, whether it's good or bad, and
yep,
then I go to my redneck self. I quote Dale Earnhardt, and I remember when Dale Earnhardt told new driver, he goes, kid, it doesn't matter if they're cheering you or booing you. You need to worry when they quit making noise,
yeah,
because now they forgot about you. So everything is an opportunity, and we as leaders, I think we're obligated to never stop learning. That I haven't encountered it yet. If I ever hear a leader who claims to be a leader tell me, "Hey, I'm just about at my limit. I think I've learned just about all I can about leadership," I'm probably going to punch them in the throat and get
yes,
another HR violation. Um, Throw it in the stack. I don't care. But we have to keep reading. We have to keep learning. We have to keep talking to each other. And again, I think that's a key point too. All of the great books, you got a bunch. Everybody's got a bunch of great books. I don't, but um, we listen to podcasts, we read books, but I think we have to also find that touch point. And I hate calling it mentoring. I've gotten to where I don't like mentoring. I don't like coaching. I just call it, hey man, it's leadership fellowship. It's, hey, get a group of leaders together, go have a cold beer, go have a coffee, and just sit around and talk about leadership things that you popped up with. And you find out, just like everything else with life, that once you share a burden, your brother probably has a burden too, and has maybe already done that burden, and go, well, I can
yeah,
help you with that.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
think we need to get back to a lot of that. We got forced into the internet, to all of this stuff during COVID. I think we got to get back to just collaborating with each other as leaders, of going, hey man, I mean, I did it with you. I called you back a few months ago. How do I handle a hard employee? In your metaphor of, there's no bad puzzle pieces, they just don't fit in your puzzle. And
yeah,
that totally changed my mindset, and it helped a ton. And people are using it now. So, it's one of those things where just a quick phone call of, hey brother, I got a problem. Hey, have you seen this?
yeah, yeah,
Can you give me a hand? And that goes back to what we learned in the military, man, of who's got your back. Reach out to the senior person, somebody that's got experience. Who just, don't be afraid to admit that you don't know what you don't know, is what it comes down to. Be open and honest with yourself and go, I have no idea what I'm doing. What
mhm.
am I doing? Can you help me? So, yeah.
That is a powerful final message. I really, really appreciate what you said. And the other thing too, I think, Chuck, you put, you put you listen to the podcast, but you took action. You're like, that message resonated with me. You connected with one of the guests, several of the previous guests
Hmm.
on the show. And again, listeners, that's what we're here for. We're providing you a resource, right? And this is a short podcast, 30 minutes only. But again, we're introducing you to a concept or a person. please reach out to them. Please connect with them. Please learn from them. Get deeper with the things that resonate with you. And I think you're going to have you're going to get more out of this podcast if you do that. And if you just listen in passively. But if you're an active listener and you take action on these things, you're going to get more out of the podcast. So my hat's off to you, Chuck, just for taking action, hooking up, meeting with the people that I've had on the show, and with the areas in your life that you were working on. And look at the situation. It's a complete turnaround, and it's a great story. And wow, so what a powerful story. Chuck, thank you for coming back on the show. I love this. So how can our listeners, if this resonated, how can they connect with you to learn more?
So the easiest way is I don't have a Substack anymore. I don't have a book. I don't have a podcast. I'm on Twitter a lot. Chief Chuck 2K is my Twitter handle, or X, or whatever we're calling it now. I don't know what it is, but that's where I hang out a lot, and that's where my DMs stay open. I don't have a ton of followers. I don't really care. But if you have listeners that have a podcast, if they're interested in me being on and sharing my story, my goal is, and I don't charge money. If you want me to speak to your business team, if you want me to speak to anybody, I'm happy to tell my story. I'm not going to charge for it. This is a calling for me. This is an ethical, moral thing that I should do. I feel like it's my calling is to share this story. If I can stop one person from winding up like I did, then I've done good, and I'm going to be happy with that. So you can reach out to me on Twitter. Email is chiefchuck2k@gmail.com. You can reach out to me. I'm happy to tell my story. I'm happy to have one-on conversations. If you just want to call me up and talk, if you're feeling down and low, reach out to me, man. Please do. There's no reason to suffer in silence anymore. So that's how you can reach me. And I'm happy to be of this service to anybody, anytime, anywhere. As we say in F3, I don't say person, but we say man. Hey, we leave no one behind, but we leave no one where we found them. So, a lot of powerful people there that can help, and I'm one of them. So happy to do it.
Absolutely. Well, such a great message, Chuck. And we're going to put links in the show notes to your resources. And again, listeners, be active with this podcast. Don't just be passive. If something resonates with you, if Chuck's message is resonating with you, reach out to him and connect with him. Learn the lessons he's learned. Don't burn out. Don't fail. Don't be that 65-year-old person that dies of a heart attack because you've stressed yourself out. Find that balance in your life. Chuck has done it. You can do it. This has been powerful. Chuck, thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for sharing the story and sharing the lessons that you learned along the way. I really appreciate it. And I know that it's going to resonate well with our listeners.
Thank you, John. It's always an honor, and I appreciate the opportunity to do it.
Well, thanks again. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.